Frank Anatole is principal architect at Network Rail, and he's leading an adventurous program of strategic work, installations, and new infrastructure that aims to restore some of the design qualities of the heyday of British Railways and British Rail. With Chairman Peter Hendy and Chief Executive Andrew Haynes as self-confessed design buffs, we're seeing major change in the look and feel of the Network Rail state. So Network Rail has set out its design principles under 9 headings, Frank. Can you tell me sort of what they are generally and how they're applied to what you're doing?
There are actually 10 principles now. The previous 9 principles were identity, passengers, community focus, collaborative, inclusive, connected, contextual, enhancing heritage, innovative, and the new one is environment. And these were quite important, actually. These have fed into a sort of design review process that we've set up. We now have a design review panel, and these principles are at the core of that design review process. And we've now written that into some standards that enable us really to sort of check projects against those principles. It's a really important part of our business now.
Yeah, so tell me about some of the projects on your desk at the moment, and what is the sort of scale of your program?
It's a very devolved organization, but and yet it's covering, obviously, it's covering the national landscape. So at the same time, the organization is trying to become devolved and regional, we still have to achieve a certain amount of consistency across the rail network. So I'm part of the technical authority. We sit centrally within what's called a technical authority, and our scope is really to cover the whole country. So we set standards and guidance and principles, and we're starting to apply that now in, for example, one of the things I've got on my desk at the moment, a whole suite of new design guidelines. Again, we have some guidelines, but they're very haphazard. They're not kind of revised. No one really looks after them. And so what we've done is we've actually put these through the standards process, and we're kind of emulating Transport for London, really, in London Underground. We've had these, a certain set of guidelines. They do very well in terms of telling the industry what they want in terms of design quality. As someone who worked on the other side of the fence and was constantly frustrated by the lack of design quality information from Network Rail, when I joined Network Rail, it was a golden opportunity for me to actually put things in place. And Anthony seemed to be pretty much up for that. So we actually were amazed to get funding to do it, because obviously what we wanted to do was approach, not just do this in-house, we wanted to approach to the industry, the external, sort of SMEs and specialists, and draw in all that very good information. So we weren't basically, navel gazing. We were getting the best quality information that we could. So we're working with SMEs really on a whole suite of guidelines. There are about 30 of them, and they're starting to come out now. They're going to look a bit like this. Don't know if you can see that, but we're working on these. Tremendously exciting. This is what's keeping me up at night a lot. That's my main focus, but there are other things. Design the review panel. We've got competitions and all sorts of things going on. It's really an exciting time, actually.
So tell me more about the competitions, because you did a competition for a new bridge that Network Rail could use earlier in the year, didn't you?
Yes, we did a footbridge competition last year, which attracted 120 entries. Mammoth competition, really some interesting entries. We got a winner from that, which was a Danish architecture firm, Gottlieb Paladin. We are now developing that bridge as part of a number of standard bridges. We've currently got 3 detailed design phase, basically, which we can roll out. There are 2 others we're thinking of doing. One actually with my old firm, Marks Barfield, which is a composite bridge. We're working with the National Centre of Composites. So there's lots going on in terms of footbridges to get rid of the sort of, well, to sort of supersede a design which you see everywhere now and has been around for at least 2 or 3 decades, and is very kind of tank-like in appearance. I think you probably know what I'm talking about, but yeah, footbridges need an upgrade. So that's led on to a station competition, which we launched, and we've just got through the first phase of that. 230 entries, an international competition, huge interest, and we've whittled that down to 6 entries, a shortlist of 6, which is quite a task. And we're about to launch that second phase to whittle it down to 3, and those 3 will be given a contract to develop station designs up to a sort of concept or detailed concept phase. The brief we set them was to reimagine stations, the interface between community and rail, and to concentrate really on the smaller to medium-sized stations, which is where all investment doesn't go to. But we see, especially in the sort of post-COVID, we see perhaps these stations having greater importance than they used to.
So at the other end of the scale, you've been doing competition with the London Festival of Architecture as well, with new ideas for seating, which is all about, you are delivering public space, aren't you, at Network Rail? We
are. I mean, I've always believed, Peter, that stations are kind of extensions of the public realm. I think some of them just happen to have roofs on them, and they are living rooms for the public. I like to call them sort of palaces for the people, because that's a book I read once by Eric Kleinenberg, who talked about the importance of having these social spaces where people can go to and kind of interact, and not feel like they're alone. And it's very much our role to make these spaces attractive and comfortable. Seating is one element of that. Toilets are another. Our toilets in the past have been dreadful. We're really looking to make those much, much better. The Victorians used to do great toilets, and they lasted for decades. And why can't we do the same? So we're asking questions like that. Toilets have gone in at Waterloo. We've been working with Blandort Brown on that. They've done sort of a fantastic job in terms of recreating the sort of a level of detail and finish and cove into the to the stalls and that sort of thing. It's just trying to get another level of quality into some of our public spaces. These guidelines are going to go some way towards doing that as well, because again, I talked about letting the industry know what you want. I think is very important. So it's speaking to the people who are sponsoring these schemes or providing money or writing the briefs for these projects, knowing what we need to get into the briefs at an early stage.
So what other sort of transport systems do you admire? You mentioned TfL, and of course their heritage of Frank Pick was incredible, and British Airways under Jane Priestman. What are the models that you see in terms of what you're delivering?
Of course, we're tremendously inspired by what was done in the 1960s by the rebranding of British Rail. I think there's a real design input there, and we've done some really good things in this country. In a European perspective, I used to work in France on the SNCF, the French railway system, on the TGV network. The French do some wonderfully expressive architectural buildings. It's questionable quality. That's one thing I learned when I was there. They build them tremendously quickly, very expressive architecturally, but yeah, sometimes once it gets past the sort of design phase, architects lose control of the actual specification. So there are pluses and minuses. The German Deutschbahn system I really like. I think it's tremendously it obviously gets a lot of investment, but I mean both French and German systems share the sort of train technology development, which I think then kind of almost informs the the stations or pulls the architecture along with it. That sort of technological advance, which I don't know if we've achieved as successfully in this country. I think the various kind of failures of the APT system, for example, have kind of had a knock-on effect, I think, in terms of the technology we've been able to or not been able to export. The French and Germans do export that sort of technology, and it's part of that railway language that they have, and I feel we could do that. So yeah, the French and German systems I do admire, not just their punctuality, but just their desire to sort of push things, like the speed record or levels of quality, and or kind of their fare system, which is a lot simpler than ours. They've got some great stations, Leipzig, Germany, and Cologne. It's just some really, really nice stations.
So traditionally, railway systems run by engineers who often think that architecture is a bit of an add-on, but you're not finding that at Network Rail.
No, I'm in a kind of good team. I've always worked with engineers. I mean, throughout my life, I've actually, and I have no problem working with engineers, particularly civil engineers, who, a lot of them do get, this kind of symbiotic relationship that you can have with architecture. In France, a lot of the architects were also engineers. I worked with Etienne Tricot, who's an architect, but also, a civil engineer. It's not unusual for people to be doing both. There are a lot more engineers in Network Rail than architects. I think it's a tiny, minuscule number, probably about under 20 architects in the entirety of Network Rail. So Network Rail is about 40,000 people, and there are probably about 20 architects in total. So we're a small group, but I think there's a respect. There's definitely a respect, especially when we produce buildings like London Bridge, and we get Client of the Year award. In many ways, and we're on the shortlist for the Sterling Award. I think that sort of thing is really important. And my role is to raise that profile even more within the Network Rail. So, for example, I'm thinking of doing things like setting up an internal prize, Network Rail, for best building, best station of the year. The focus is on passengers at the moment, and that's Andrew Haynes' big sort of focus. And that's all about station environments. That's all about how we look after people, producing London bridges, but on a smaller scale. Stations becoming really part of communities, not just sitting there, but actually, routes through stations becoming part of the urban framework. I think is really important. Fascinating. I absolutely love the challenge. It's great.
Very good. Well, maybe a small team, but obviously having a big impact, and as you say, very much towards improving the public's experience of using the transport system. So, Frank, thank you very much for your insights and conversation.
Thank you, Peter.